Okay, so have you ever had that feeling where you're like really trying to wrap your head around something new,
Yeah.
but you're just completely like drowning in information? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Like there are just articles everywhere and research papers,
Right.
and you're just like, I can't even process all this. And then your own notes are all over the place.
It's so overwhelming.
I mean, it really is. You're
Yeah.
just chasing your tail all the time.
Yeah.
What if there was a way to just cut through all that noise
Right.
and just like get to the core of what you actually need to know
Yeah.
without all the extra baggage?
Absolutely. And especially, tailored to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're diving into today.
Okay, cool.
So you gave me this really interesting collection of sources.
Uh-huh.
And basically what we're going to try to do is pull out the most important ideas,
Yeah.
the stuff that you really need to understand,
Okay.
and present it to you in a way that's clear and hopefully useful.
Right.
So you don't have to go through all of it yourself.
Yeah. I like it.
It's like we're doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
This is actually something I'm personally pretty excited about.
Really?
So remember you were asking about building your own private local AI assistant?
Oh, yeah.
So you have like an AI that's just for you,
Oh.
respects your privacy. It's all on your own machine.
Right.
No cloud cost every time you want to use it.
Okay.
Just becomes this super efficient personal tool.
Yeah, that's the dream, right?
Yeah. And the material you gave me, it actually gives a pretty clear path
Wow.
to building a basic version of this.
Okay.
Like, it's almost like a starter kit for your own AI Superbot.
I love that AI Superbot.
Yeah. And it involves 4 key technologies.
Okay.
I mean, they might sound a bit intimidating at first,
Yeah.
but they're really just tools that allow you to do this.
Okay.
So there's GraphRAG,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like a really smart way for your AI to find and understand information.
Okay.
And then there's AutoGen,
Mm-hmm.
and that allows you to build these like teams of AIs that can work together.
Okay.
And then there's Ollama, and this is really cool because this is your own like personal server
Oh, wow.
that allows you to run the AI brains,
Uh-huh.
the large language models, like
Yeah.
right on your computer.
Wow. Okay.
And then finally there's Chainlit, and that's what helps you create a nice, easy to use chat interface.
Right, like a familiar interface.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So imagine this. You could ask your local AI to go through a stack of research papers for you,
Huh?
pull out the key findings,
Yeah.
and then cross-reference that with your own notes.
Wow.
And this is all happening on your own device.
That's amazing.
Secure, no need to send anything to the cloud.
I like it.
Okay, so let's start with GraphRAG.
Okay.
What exactly is this, and why is it better than just regular information retrieval?
Okay. So you've probably heard of a RAG,
Right.
Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Yeah.
And that's where AI uses external information to give you more accurate and relevant answers.
Okay.
It's not just making stuff up.
Yeah.
It's actually going out and finding stuff.
Right.
So usually this involves something called vector search.
Okay.
Imagine you have this huge library,
Uh-huh.
and every book has a unique fingerprint
Yeah.
based on its contents.
Okay.
When you ask a question,
Right.
the AI can use these fingerprints to find the books that are most relevant.
Gotcha.
GraphRAG takes this a step further.
Okay.
Instead of just grabbing individual pieces of information,
Yeah.
it uses something called a knowledge graph.
Okay.
Now think of a knowledge graph like a network
Uh-huh.
where facts aren't just listed out.
Right.
They're connected by relationships.
So it understands how they all fit together.
Exactly. It understands not just what something is,
Right.
but how it relates to other things.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So instead of just knowing, okay, Python is a programming language,
Uh-huh.
it also knows that Python is used with Chainlit to build interfaces,
Exactly.
and Python can talk to Ollama to run AI models.
Yeah.
It's like the AI has this much deeper understanding of how things are connected.
It like sees the whole picture.
It's not just isolated facts.
Got it.
The example they gave in the source was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
It was using programming concepts.
Okay.
So imagine you ask this GraphRAG system about Python.
Uh-huh.
It can give you details about Python itself, of course,
Right.
but it can also tell you about how it relates to Chainlit,
Right.
which is what you use to build those interactive interfaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ollama, which is your local LLM
Like
server. It's like it understands the whole ecosystem.
I see. So it's not just about the one thing. It's about all the things that connect to it.
Exactly. It's about the relationships.
That's cool.
And they even gave a little snippet of code.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it showed you how to actually build a very basic knowledge graph using Python.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they used this library called NetworkX,
Mm-hmm.
and it showed you how to create what they call an in-memory knowledge graph.
Okay.
So this means that It exists in your computer's memory
Right.
while the program is running.
Yeah. The code snippet was really basic.
Yeah.
It showed you how to create this graph.
Right.
Add what they called nodes, which represent the different things.
Like Python and a llama and chainlet.
Exactly. And then edges to show the relationships between them.
So like Python uses a llama.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then they had this little function called retrieve knowledge.
Okay.
And it showed you how you could query this very basic graph
Gotcha.
to find information.
Okay, so for someone who's just starting out
Yeah.
and wants to kind of visualize how these connections are made,
Yeah.
that Network X example seems like a pretty good way to start.
It's a good starting point, yeah.
But for anything beyond just like playing around,
Right.
you probably need something a little more heavy duty.
You need the real deal.
Yeah, like a real database.
Exactly. They suggested using a dedicated graph database,
Yeah.
like Neo4j.
Okay.
And you can install this really easily.
Really?
Yeah, just with the command pip install Neo4j.
Okay.
And these databases are specifically built to handle
Right.
these huge, complex networks of relationships.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a specialized tool for this kind of knowledge graph stuff.
Precisely.
And they also mentioned that you can build these graphs from existing data.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So if you've got information in spreadsheets
Uh-huh.
or CSV files,
Yeah.
you can actually use that to create a knowledge graph.
That's super useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about GraphRAG,
Right.
which gives the AI this enhanced ability to retrieve interconnected information.
Right.
Now let's move on to AutoGen.
Okay, cool.
So the name kind of gives it away.
Yeah, it sounds like it's about making AI more automated,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
more collaborative.
AutoGen actually simplifies the process of creating multi-agent AI systems.
Okay.
So instead of having one AI that tries to do everything,
Yeah.
you can actually create multiple AI agents
Okay.
that can communicate and work together to achieve a goal.
So it's like a team of AIs.
Exactly. It's like assembling a team of specialists, each with their own strengths.
So you could have like one agent whose job is to dig into the knowledge graph using GraphRAG to find relevant context.
Yeah.
And then another agent could take that information
Right.
and focus on like crafting a well-written answer.
Precisely. You got it.
Okay.
And they actually mentioned several different types of agents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's the assistant agent.
Okay.
That's your general purpose helpful AI.
Right, right.
Then there's the conversable agent,
Okay.
and that's specifically designed for back and forth conversations.
Gotcha.
Like more interactive.
Yeah, like a chat.
Exactly. And then there's the user proxy agent.
Okay.
And this one's interesting
Yeah.
because it can act on your behalf.
What do you mean by that?
So it can actually execute code
Whoa.
or interact with external systems
Right.
if you give it permission.
So it's like it's an extension of you in the digital world.
Precisely.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it can be a bit scary if you think about it too much.
It's also really powerful.
Incredibly powerful.
Okay. And they mentioned some other specialized agents too.
Yeah, they talked about like a researcher agent
Okay.
that's really good at finding information
Right.
and a planner agent that can break down complex tasks into smaller steps.
Okay, so you can really customize this team.
Yeah, you can build the perfect team for your specific needs.
So these agents aren't just like randomly chatting with each other.
Right.
There's some structure to how they work together.
Absolutely. They highlight this concept of asynchronous communication,
Okay.
which means that agents can send messages
Right.
without having to wait for an immediate response.
Okay.
It's kind of like email.
So they can work more efficiently.
Exactly. And you can customize the rules for how they interact.
So you could have one agent that retrieves information from the knowledge graph and then passes it off to another agent.
Right.
That's really good at formulating a response.
Precisely. And the best part is that AutoGen is designed to work with local LLMs.
Okay, so the LLMs are those large language models, which are like the brains of the operation.
Exactly.
And a llama is what lets us run those locally.
Right.
So this is all starting to come together.
It is.
Okay, so tell me more about a llama.
Okay, so a llama is essentially your own personal server for running these large language models.
Okay.
Which are, like I said, the brains of the operation.
Right.
They understand and generate human-like text.
Yeah.
So instead of having to rely on some cloud service,
Right.
every time you want to use an AI
Which costs money.
and has privacy concerns,
Right.
you can download and run them on your own computer. Like having the AI right there on your desktop.
So the main benefits are privacy
Yes.
and cost savings.
Exactly.
Because your data never leaves your machine. And once you've downloaded a model, you can use it as much as you want.
You don't have to pay per use.
Right.
But There are some trade-offs.
What do you mean?
Well, these large language models can be pretty resource intensive, especially the more powerful ones.
So you need a computer with enough RAM.
Especially RAM
Yeah.
and processing power.
Yeah. But they did mention that using a graphics card.
Okay.
Especially with NVIDIA cards and something called CEDA support.
Yeah, I've heard of CEDA.
It can really speed things up.
So if you have a decent graphics card, your local AI could actually be pretty snappy.
Oh, yeah. The speed improvements can be really dramatic.
That's good to know.
They even gave a tip for enabling GPU support with this thing called Llama CPP Python.
Okay.
Which is a component of a llama.
Right.
It basically involves running a specific pip install command that tells the installation process to use your NVIDIA graphics card.
Cool.
Oh, and they also mentioned that a llama usually serves the model
Yeah.
at this specific address on your local machine.
Which is?
It's http://localhost.11434.
Okay.
And you usually don't need an API key when you're using it locally.
That's convenient.
Yeah, one less thing to worry about.
Okay, so we've got GraphRAG for smart information retrieval,
Right.
AutoGen for managing our AI team.
And a llama for running the AI models privately.
Yeah,
So the last piece of the puzzle seems to be Chainlit.
it is.
What did that do?
So Chainlit is all about making your AI Superbot user-friendly.
Okay.
It lets you quickly build interactive chatbot interfaces.
Gotcha.
It's like the window through which you talk to your AI.
So it's not just some complicated command line interface.
Yeah, no.
It's like an actual chat app.
That's exactly
like
that.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's designed to be familiar and easy to use.
Okay.
And it can handle the real-time back-and-forth communication.
So you can have a natural conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And they said that if you run a Chainlit app,
Yeah.
it'll just open this chat interface right in your web browser.
Okay, this is all making sense now.
Good.
So we've got all the tools.
Yeah.
Now, how do we actually put them together
Right.
to build this AI Superbot?
That's the fun part.
So the source actually walked through a step-by-step process.
They did.
So let's start with the prerequisites.
Okay.
What do we need before we even begin?
Well, first of all, they made it clear that Llama currently works best on Ubuntu 22.04
Okay.
or a similar version of macOS.
Okay.
So while it might work on other systems,
Right.
these are the recommended ones.
Gotcha. And what about hardware?
Okay, so they gave minimum and recommended specs
Oh, yeah.
for the operating system, like we said, macOS 11 Plus or Ubuntu 22.04 Plus.
Got it.
For Python, they suggest using version 3.0 to 3.12
Okay.
for the best compatibility with all the libraries.
Makes sense.
RAM is important.
Yeah, how much do we need?
They said at least 8 GB if you're just experimenting,
Okay.
but ideally 16 GB or more
Okay.
if you want to run the more capable model smoothly.
So more RAM equals better performance.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, and what about disk space?
You'll need at least 20 GB to get started,
Okay.
but they recommend 50 GB or more,
Okay.
just to be safe.
To accommodate different models and data.
Exactly.
Okay.
For the CPU, they said at least 4 cores,
Okay.
but 8 or more is better.
Right. So faster CPU also helps.
Yeah, definitely.
And what about a graphics card? Is that required?
It's not strictly necessary
Yeah.
because the models can run on the CPU,
Right.
but if you have a decent graphics card,
Yeah.
especially an NVIDIA card with compute capability of 5.0 or higher,
Uh-huh.
or an AMD or NVIDIA card with compute capability of 6.0 or higher,
Okay.
it can make a big difference.
It could really speed up the AI processing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, and for NVIDIA GPUs specifically,
Yeah.
they recommend having CUD 11.0 or newer installed,
Right.
but it's not absolutely required
Okay.
if you're okay with slower processing on the CPU.
So it's a trade-off between speed and convenience.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so once we've got the hardware sorted out,
Right.
what are the first steps to set up the software?
Okay, so step 1 is to check your Python version
Okay.
and then create and activate a virtual environment.
Right. Virtual environment's always a good idea.
Yeah, it helps to isolate your project.
Yeah, so it doesn't mess with other stuff on your computer.
Exactly. And they provided the commands for doing this using venv,
Okay.
which is built into Python,
Yeah.
and also using conda if you have that installed.
Okay.
So virtual environment first,
Right.
then what's next?
Installing the main software, I guess.
You got it.
Okay, so what do we install first?
Okay, so the next big thing is installing Llama.
Right.
The source said to go to the official website ollama.ai for the most up-to-date instructions.
Gotcha.
Because it can change.
Right.
And for Linux users, they actually gave this convenient curl command that downloads and runs an installation script.
So it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, very straightforward.
Okay, so once Ollama is installed,
Right.
we need to make sure it's working properly.
Exactly. You can check the version by running Ollama version.
Got it.
And you can test the API.
Oh, okay. How do you do that?
Just run curl http://localhost.11434.
And that'll tell you if it's running and accessible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
So Ollama is up and running. Now, what about all the other Python libraries?
Right. So we need NetworkX and Neo4j for the knowledge graph stuff.
Yeah.
Remember, NetworkX is for the basic example.
Right.
And Neo4j is for real-world applications.
Sure.
And then we need AutoGen for AutoGen. And Chainlit for Chainlit.
Okay.
Oh, and they also mentioned requests.
What's that for?
It's a handy library for making API calls.
Okay.
Which you might need for more advanced stuff.
Gotcha.
You can install all of these with pip.
Okay.
Just run pip install network su neo4j pytogen chainlit requests.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got all the pieces installed.
We do.
But they're not talking to each other yet.
Right, we need to integrate them.
So how do we do that?
Okay, so first with Ollama and GraphRAG,
you
need to download and run a large language model using Ollama.
Okay.
The example they gave was to download the Mistral model using the command Ollama pull Mistral.
Got it.
And then start it running with Ollama run Mistral, and you'll probably want to keep Ollama running in the background.
Right, so it's always available.
Exactly.
And they also said that for this guide, they're using that simple in-memory NetworkX graph.
Right.
Just to illustrate the concept.
Yeah.
But for real-world applications,
right,
you'd want to switch to Neo4j.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you've got the LLM running locally,
right through Ollama, and your knowledge graph set up, we need to connect AutoGen to all of this.
Right.
How do we do that?
Okay, so there's this code snippet they provided that shows you how to configure AutoGen to talk to your local Ollama server.
Okay.
It creates this configuration list called config list Ollama, which specifies the name of the language model.
Right, like Mistral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the base URL for the Ollama API,
which is usually http://localhost.11434.
Right.
And they also set the API type to OpenAI.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Why is that?
Well, it's because AutoGen was originally designed to work with OpenAI's API. So even though we're using Ollama, it still expects the API to look kind of similar.
Gotcha. So it's like we're translating between the two.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And this configuration is then used to create something called lmconfig Ollama.
Okay.
And finally, the code shows how to define an assistant agent and a user proxy agent using this configuration.
Okay. And they mentioned that you don't need to provide an API key.
You don't.
Because we're using Ollama locally.
Exactly.
Which is nice.
It is.
But they did also mention that there might be some compatibility issues between AutoGen and Ollama's API.
Right, because AutoGen is really designed for OpenAI. So there might be slight differences in how Ollama structures its API.
Great.
And they suggested using a proxy tool.
Oh.
Like LitLM.
What does that do?
LitLM basically acts as a translator between AutoGen and Ollama.
So it smooths over any differences.
Exactly. It helps them communicate.
Good to know. Okay, so we've got Ollama running our knowledge graph setup.
Yep.
And AutoGen configured to talk to Ollama.
We're almost there.
Now, how does Chainlit fit into all of this?
Right. So Chainlit is what gives us that nice chat interface. And they provided a sample script called appui.py.
Right.
And this script shows you how to build a basic Chainlit app that integrates with everything else.
Cool.
So it shows you how to take the user's query from the chat interface, retrieve relevant context from the knowledge graph.
Using that retrieve knowledge function.
Exactly. And then combine that context with the user's original query and send it all to AutoGen.
So it's like it's enriching the user's question with additional information from the knowledge graph.
Yeah, it's giving the AI more to work with.
Okay, cool.
And the script also handles asynchronous communication with AutoGen, which makes the app more responsive.
Gotcha.
And it includes some basic error handling.
Always a good thing.
Yeah, it makes the app more robust.
Okay, so just to clarify.
Yeah.
I type something into the chat.
Right.
The app uses GraphRAG, or our simple NetworkX graph in this case, to find related information, adds that to my question, and then sends it off to AutoGen, which uses Ollama to generate a response.
Exactly.
And then that response is displayed back to me in the chainlet interface.
You got it.
That's a lot of moving parts.
It is, but it all works together pretty seamlessly.
And the code uses these things called decorators.
Yeah, like cl.onChatStart
Okay.
to define what happens when specific events occur.
Right.
So, for example, cl.onChatStart is what runs when you first open the chat.
Okay.
And that's where you initialize the AutoGen agents.
Gotcha.
And then cl.onMessage handles each new message you send. It retrieves the right agents, calls retrieve knowledge to get the context from the graph,
right,
constructs the prompt, and then uses userproxy.initiaChat to start the conversation with the assistant agent.
Okay, so it's like a chain of events.
It really is.
That happen each time you send a message.
And it also includes await assistant.receive to handle the response from the assistant.
Right.
And then await a message to send the response back to you.
Gotcha.
And of course, there's a try except block
to handle any errors.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a pretty clear picture of how the code works.
It is.
So how do we actually run this app?
Okay, so you open your terminal, navigate to the directory where you saved appui.py.
Right.
And then you just run chainlet run appui.py.
And that will open the chat interface in my browser.
It should, yeah.
Okay, and they also reminded us to make sure Ollama is running.
You can check that with curl http.localhost.11434.
Right.
And they also mentioned something about thread safety.
What's that?
So basically, if you have multiple users trying to use the app at the same time, you need to be careful about how you manage the sessions.
So things don't get mixed up. Okay, so even with this early version of our Superbot, we can actually start to have a conversation with our own local AI.
It's pretty amazing.
What kind of things could we actually do with it?
So even at this stage, you can do some pretty useful things.
Okay, like what?
Well, one thing is question answering. Based on your personal knowledge graph.
Right.
So let's say you've built a knowledge graph about programming concepts.
Yeah.
You can ask it a question.
Right.
And it can give you a really detailed and relevant answer.
Because it understands how all those concepts are connected.
Exactly. It's not just giving you generic answers.
That's cool.
They also mentioned document summarization.
Okay.
So you could feed it research papers or long articles. And it could pull in related context.
From other documents or your knowledge graph.
Exactly. To generate a much more comprehensive summary.
That sounds super helpful.
It really does.
Especially for dealing with information overload.
Absolutely.
Okay, what else?
They also talked about multi-agent task collaboration.
Right.
So even with just the basic agents, you can start experimenting with having different AIs work together.
To accomplish a goal.
Right.
Okay.
And they also mentioned creating a personalized learning assistant.
Oh, wow.
So if you built a knowledge graph from your study materials, you could have your AI explain things to you in different ways.
Right.
Or even generate practice questions.
So it's like having a personal tutor.
Exactly. And it's all local and private.
That's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
So even this basic version can do some really powerful things.
It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
And they emphasize that you now have the basic knowledge to start building your own AI Superbot.
And they also hinted at some next steps. Expert speaker.